And now let's drop in Hon.Dr. Babu Owino, who is the Embakasi East Member of Parliament. He also sits in the Budget and Appropriations Committee, of course similar to Honorable Tabitha Mutinda, who is the Vice Chair in the Senate Committee. Dr. Babu, good morning. IMF is now warning of Kenya actually cutting on its taxes after approving more than 150 billion Kenya shilling, some of which will actually go to the repayment of the Eurobond. Do you feel the economy is stable?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chacha. First of all, good morning to my comrades and colleagues. That is Honorable Ruku, a great friend of mine, Honorable Basil, the future part of the future of the nation, and Honorable Tabitha, who is also my constituent and a very, very intelligent lady. Number one, I want to talk about this debate of IMF, and I want to tell you that the current state of the economy in Kenya is so wanting, it is so limping, and I want to say that the president has failed us in one way or the other by being a puppet of the West. Ruto is now a white man in a black skin, playing to the tune of IMF, and IMF is busy paralyzing this nation. And Mr. Chacha, the moment IMF tells you to go right, know that left is the best direction or route. And in the world, IMF has never been known to have succeeded in advising anybody. The sole responsibilities of IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, number one is to secure financial stability. Number two is to create employment. Number three is to sustain economic growth and development, and also to reduce poverty. But what are we seeing in this situation? There is a principle called the twin impossibility, where IMF is advising Kenya to float its exchange rate, and the economists there will help me understand, Mr. Ruku and Madam Tabitha. In macroeconomics and economic policy, we know that a floating exchange rate is a currency where the price is determined by the supply and the demand factors relative to other currencies. We know very well that the IMF is telling us to float our exchange rate, and at the same time, it is giving Kenya a condition for the loan, that Kenya as a nation must retain its inflation rate at 5%. You can't do these two things in tandem or consecutively. Why? Because the moment you do that, you deny the economy the purchasing power. Fast forward, move very fast to the central bank rate, which I want to connect with the IMF debate. The lending rate now is at over 10%, approximately 12%, which is the highest in the entire Africa. In the United States of Africa, the lending rate is at 3%, and at times it goes back to negative. This means that commercial banks have no capacity to make money through loans or create credit. You can't do anything because we know that money is a supply. Money supply is a function of a capacity of the commercial bank. So if you look at the lending rates, Mr. Church, the government has made sure that the public has no purchasing power by increasing the central bank rate as demanded by IMF, which means IMF is directly controlling Kenya. And what does the higher rate in the central bank rate, the 12% mean to Kenya? When you increase the central bank rate, definitely the interest rate will go up. That they are directly proportional. Hence, the cost of goods and services in Kenya will go up. And this is what we call in economics contractionary monetary policy. And Mr. Ruku will advise you on that. Therefore, if the interest rate is high, then the return on investment will automatically be high. And two things will happen in such a situation. Number one, the investment in this nation will decrease, businesses will go down or fizzle out. And number two, the prices of goods and services will be high. Once the prices of goods and services are high, there will be low demand for goods and services because of the reduced aggregate on demand. In short, IMF wants inflation rates to be controlled at 5% with a margin of either plus or minus 2.5% approximately. And to achieve this, the government is playing their ball by ensuring that they are controlling the demand by employing the contractionary monetary policy, by increasing the central bank lending rate.
But
if you look at the
according
Great
to your
Depression
chair,
in the
Dr.
United
Babu
States of
Ndindi
America,
Nyoro,
Mr. Chair,
we cannot afford to, of course, not go the contractionary way, whereas our economy is actually expansionary. How do you strike a balance?
you know, it's not possible to take the contractionary monetary policy, because when you do that, you will automatically increase the purchasing power.
But every other major economy is doing
will
that.
automatically reduce the purchasing power. But what the government is doing is to deny citizens the purchasing power, which means that IMF is solely controlling this nation through what we call the neo-colonialism.
On
Now
now
there was
the
a
weakening.
Great Depression in the United States of America. What did President Franklin Roosevelt do? Between the year 1931 and 1941, which almost brought this world economy to its knees, it assaulted the economy. He hired an economist. And Ruku, if you did economics for 6 years, you know a gentleman from the Great Britain who was called John Maynard Keynes, the Keynesian theory. He came up with the Keynesian theory that states that increase money into the pockets of the people. If you increase money into the pockets of the people, you create a spending frenzy. Then, therefore, people will purchase more. The more people purchase, the more there's high aggregate demand, there will be high aggregate supply.
Dr. Babu.
The two meet, we create what we call the macroeconomic equilibrium.
Dr. Babu. Now,
no, Adam Smith did not say that. My brother, Adam Smith, in his Wealth of Nations, defended what we call the capitalism. And Adam Smith is advising us that it is not by the benevolence of the butcher, nor the kindness of the chef that we get to eat our dinner, but by their interest attached to it. That's the IMF interest attached to the Kenyan interest.
Dr. Babu, now on the weakening Kenyan shilling, it's now edging towards 170 to the dollar. And IMF actually recommended that we leave the shilling to, be determined by the forces in the market. Perhaps do you feel there is a need actually for the government to intervene and cushion the Kenyan shilling?
You know, we've decided to devalue our shilling, and our shilling is no longer useful. It's only useful in our nation, but we can't do any business with it anywhere. And you see, this dollar is going to stabilize at 200 shillings. And believe you me, as an actuary, I can easily know the risk management. It's going to stable. The equilibrium is going to be at 200 Kenya shillings. And that is hurtful to Kenyans, because we are importing 80% of the goods and of the goods that we consume in Kenya, including a tissue paper, toothpick. We import them. And that is what we call, now, as we import all this, we call it absorption in economy. As we import all this, we use the foreign currencies to pay all this. And therefore, we cannot manage without increasing taxes, which are also leaking to other economies. So the government, in its wisdom or lack of the same, is hurting citizens by increasing taxes. Mr. Ruku and Madam Tabitha, economists, will tell you clearly that anytime you increase a tax, you cannot collect the revenue that you require as a nation because of low demand.
Thank you so much, Dr. Babu Owino. He is the Bakassi East Member of Parliament. He also sits in the Budget and Appropriations Committee of the National Assembly.